Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. In the name of Allah, the Compassionate, the Most Merciful, all praise is due to Allah, and may His peace and blessings be upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I begin by greeting you all wherever you are, whatever time it may be where you are. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. May the peace and the blessings of Allah be upon all of you. And thank you again for joining us here on Let's Talk About It on Thursdays. Few months back, after the death of George Floyd, hundreds of thousands of people demonstrated in protesting what has just taken place, police brutality, the mistreatment of African American men, people. And people thought that this is really what represents America. This is America at its best. Few days back, to be exact, January 6th, we saw an intersection taking place in Washington, D.C. And again, people said, this is the worst of America versus the best of America, or what took place on Wednesday, January 6th, is really America, just it was not visible. What does that mean to us, and how are we to respond to this? This is the topic of our talk tonight, and our guest is a good friend. He's been on our show before, Executive Director of MPAC in Los Angeles, Muslim Public Affairs Council, my good friend Salam Al-Maryati. Salam, thank you for joining us, and it is good to have you on, man.
Always good to be with you. Yes, thank you.
Jazakallah khair. Salam, this is really confusing. Which one is America? The people who demonstrated for George Floyd, or what took place on January 6th?
Well, I think the basic answer is there's more than one America. There are many Americas. And you find, for example, what happened in Washington, that this insurrection that was instigated by a sitting president, violating our own Constitution. You know, the Congress was doing nothing more than following the Constitution. And I wonder, of the tens of thousands of people who were rioting in front of the Congress, if they ever read the Constitution. I mean, to be a good American, you have to read the Constitution. Like, to be a good Muslim, you have to read the Quran. And I think one of the biggest problems of our society is that people don't read. They don't understand what's going on, and that's why they're easily duped. Now, there's definitely some of them who knew exactly what was going on. They are wicked opportunists, and they were the ones who were instigating the violence. But when you hear about, for example, that there are law enforcement people, off-duty police officers who were part of the rioting. There was a Olympic gold medalist in swimming who was part of the rioting. Then you know there was a state official from West Virginia who was part of it. This is the ugly part of our country. And then the other part that you were referring to is really the beautiful part of America. The beautiful part where people of all walks of life, of all races, of all faiths, coming together, speaking in one voice for justice. So it's both. And the question is, which part of America will prevail? I tend to believe that the better part of America will prevail. I still believe in people. I still believe in our country. I still believe in our Constitution. I still believe that the arc of justice will bend, and it is our job to bend it towards justice. So we still have to have that hope, as the Quran says. Only those who deny faith are those who lose hope. So we have to believe in that betterment and that the better part of America.
And you know, Salam, I'm not sure if it is a loss of hope or it was just the sense of disappointment and confusion. So on the one hand, like you said, there are these many Americas, but then you also cannot help but, what is it now? 75 million people voted for the president, fully knowing where he stands as far as race is concerned. 75 million is a lot of people, Salam. And that is why, is it really many Americas? Yeah, technically I can see
Well,
that. But I
yeah,
think that there is like,
I mean, the 75 million, by the way, some of those 75 million were Muslim. Uh, and there were more Muslims who voted for Trump in 2020 than they did in 2016. So we have a lot to talk about. But I'm not sure if that I mean, it's still a lot of people, but I'm not sure if that 75 million will hold after what happened last week. There were 10 Republican members of Congress that voted for impeachment. There were more who spoke out against Trump but didn't vote for impeachment. There were more who were saying, yes, it was wrong, but they tried to turn the tables on the Democrats and said that you guys are doing the same thing in terms of political violence. So that 75 million, yes, there were it registered high in November 3rd. I'm not sure if we're at that same level now. I think a lot of people have left, and there are Republicans like McConnell who are looking for an opportunity to do away with Trump from the Republican Party. So, having said that, you're right. There is a problem why so many people would vote for a person that really doesn't care about our country. It's clear now. Doesn't care about the Constitution. Doesn't care about. He cares only about himself. Why did they vote for that? Is it about anger? Is it about this feeling of entitlement that they feel? There's so many issues that we have to look at, and we should study it. But one important fact is that between 1920 and 1950, we had the highest rate of of white Americans, about 80%. By 2040 or 2045, white Americans will be less than 50%. So yes, there's this feeling of disempowerment, disenfranchisement, really a feeling of entitlement, and so we have to look at that right, square in the eye and deal with it. I think that it requires us to do more engagement, more dialogue with people who are more or less on the fence. Can we sway some of those people to be more rational, to be um, more decent in terms uh, of respecting the rights of all people?
God.
Um,
Salam, I'm sorry. I don't mean to
oh,
interrupt.
sorry, I'm rambling. I'm
That's
rambling. Yeah,
okay. No, no,
yeah,
that's okay. We will talk about how to respond to that.
yeah.
But another concern I think that also comes to mind is the idea of white supremacy returning to mainstream politics. That part is absolutely scary.
Yes,
Okay, says a black man. Okay, and what has happened is, I think for many people, especially in the African American community, they're saying, look, this is what happened on the 6th of January. That is really what America is about.
right.
This historically, America has always been this way. But if you're not African American, you have not been the recipient of that type of America. So when we speak about the many Americas that you refer to many people in the African American community, no, there's only one America, and it is the America that they saw on the 6th of January. So this idea of the return of white supremacy to mainstream politics, that was not something that we've experienced in, at least in our lifetimes,
I,
as explicitly and as overtly
but I
as.
think, yes, I think what my point is that I think January 6th was a turning point of pushing white supremacy off of mainstream America. I think people saw the extremism, the 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 the, the radical nature of this group, the indecent part of it, and people were turned off. They were disgusted by it. Before then, I agreed it was more mainstream, but I look at January 6th as an opportunity to use the political events to cleanse our government, our law enforcement, our military from white supremacy. That should be the first order of business, is to not allow white supremacists to hide behind the cover of being those in authority, and taking an oath for office when they don't really believe in that oath. This is where we need to do the work to cleanse our government from white supremacy and our law enforcement and our military. That's number one. Number two, we need protection. I mean, we're still 1% of the population, and we need strategic relationships with powers like the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam did in Mecca when he had enemies, and he developed strategic partnerships and relationships with people that offered the Muslims protection. I think we're in that same boat right now. Having said that, the problem of double standards, of racism, of people being abused, yes, this is where we also need to take the opportunity for real reform, real changes within our policies, of law enforcement to make those changes. I believe that Joe Biden is earnest in doing that. I believe, as he said, remember when he made the victory speech, he basically said the reason why he is president today is because of the black vote. There's no other way of explaining why Joe Biden made it. So that black vote now is what he is beholden to, and therefore he is going to listen to African Americans on these issues. And this is the opportunity for us to make the changes, starting from the top, which is the presidency of the United States.
Got it. And again, Salam, appreciate you saying this. And again, we will come back to the need, and you're talking about the alliance and the protection, and who these people are and how do we go about accomplishing that. Mm-hmm. Going back to what you were saying about the statistics, the number of Anglo-Americans in the 1920s and then 60s, and then what is the projected number in, I think you said 2045, where whites are going to be a minority. They will no longer be representing the 80% and what have you. And I remember in one of the interviews with Steve Bannon, he was talking about his favorite book. His favorite book of all times, he said, is the Camp of the Saints. I looked that up, and looking into the Camp of the Saints, supposedly it is a 1973 French fiction novel by Jean Raspel. And what he is talking about, he's talking about the destruction of Western civilization through third world mass immigration to France and the West. And the way that this argument is being framed is that this is the West against the rest. And again, and that is why, like you say, that there is a lot of fear out there, about this growing type of ideology. Okay. And I really, Salam, I'm struggling with this idea of these people being a minority or being a fringe. I'm not sure if I really, I'm not a pessimist, but I'm not sure that I really want to. I'm having a hard time accepting this.
About white supremacists being a fringe?
They're not. I'm saying, speaking about, they are now part of mainstream politics. And you're saying that, no, January 6th took them away. And I'm saying, no, they're very, very present. Well, these people knew who Trump was, and they still, 75 million voted for him. Yes, including some of these Muslims. But 75 million is a really, really significant number.
Of course, it's a significant number. And, whether they're fringe or mainstream, there's still a lot of them. But remember that this problem was with us before. Was it 1990? Was it 93 or 94? Was the Oklahoma City bombing by the white militia?
Right.
There was Ruby Ridge. There was Waco. So the idea of white nationalists taking arms against the federal government is not new. It gained a political foothold like you're talking about under the what do you call those Republicans? The the Tea Party, and then from that Tea Party, it found a political figure, an icon in Trump. Now, I believe Trump is ostracized from mainstream politics. He is even by his own Republican Party, he is being pushed aside. So what they don't have that same icon. They are now scattered. They will be hunted down by the federal government. Um, I don't think they're gonna. I think their heyday is over. But are they still a threat? Absolutely. There's and do people still harbor that sentiment, even if they're not going to be open about it? Yes, I do believe that people have a sense of racial pride that they feel that they've lost, even though they had nothing to do with the greatness of our country to begin with. It's a feeling of entitlement. So I think that our job is to continue working. Invite people to the way of your Lord with beautiful admonition and with wisdom. And when you argue with them, argue in a way, or debate them, or have discourse, do it in a way where you come up with something better. And that is our task right now. What is that better? Instead of fixating ourselves, and I'm not saying that you are, I think you're doing a great analysis, but we should not let that analysis cripple us, paralysis by analysis. That we keep talking about, well, what if this and what if that, and where are they? And but think about, well, what is our vision for America, and how do we invite people to join us in partnership for that vision? How do we take the leadership in that mission? And these are the great opportunities for us happening right now. There are more Muslims now appointed to the White House and Domestic Policy Council and so many agencies than ever before. So we have an opportunity to build upon that and to make something great from it, starting from our communities, starting with dialogues with our churches and conservative churches in particular, and see who's willing to engage. And from that, these acts of compassion, I believe, will make a big difference for all of us.
And why do you say conservative churches in particular?
Because I think that is where the needle needs to move. We need to move the needle with them. The liberals, they're already defending us, and I'm not saying disavow that or discard that, you know, fortify that. But the real change needs to be made with the conservative side. You know, one of the criticisms I've heard from somebody who works at Georgetown, he says, you know, you Muslims, you're always just dealing with what we consider the fringe. You know, people that have kind of left religion, but you know, they have the veneer of religion, but they're so far to the left that they kind of they chuckle about it, that it's considered religion. But in any case, that's an internal battle between between the Christian community itself. But I'm saying that the strategic change needs to be made with conservative communities.
And Salam, it doesn't, like in the Muslim community, I think I can attest to that. And I say, isn't that because we feel safe amongst the liberals? You know, there is that sense of, as a minority, somehow you want acceptance, a sense
Yeah,
of belonging. And again, by no means I am, this is not about liberal ideology as much
yeah,
as it is about, this is where we feel safe, and that explains why we are where we are.
yeah, and it's also in politics. It's the same thing. It's the far left politicians who come and we support them, but at the end of the day, you know, I we believe that Islam and the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam are both working for gradualism on the one hand, gradual change that we've seen throughout the history of Islam, that gradually it dealt with the issues of socio-economic injustice and but at the same time, revolutionary ideas. And I think we have to look at America in the same way. We cannot expect change overnight. There has to be a movement of gradualism in developing that change, and embrace the prophetic voice. The prophetic voice is Ibrahim alayhi salam was an ummah of how many? Three. It was him and his wife and his son. And now look what happened after his life. Musa alayhi salam was told to wait in the desert after he liberated his people from the Pharaoh. Isa alayhi salam was taken when he was very young because he was persecuted. So the prophetic voice is not the voice that says we want instantaneous gratification. The prophetic voice is how do we plant the seed that will grow into a better tree, which is the good word for tomorrow.
And how do you propose that this gradual change takes place, or at least if we are to engage with the conservatives? Are we talking about theology? Are we talking about what is it? You know, when I look into conservatives, you look into how much we have in common with them, especially on a great deal of these issues. But then again, they are perceived within our community as bigots, people who are racist, and that just makes the engagement with them difficult. Who and how is that barrier going to be
So
broken between us and the conservatives?
yeah, just to also put in perspective, there are liberals who are also very racist. There are
True.
liberals who are anti-Muslim.
True.
They create. You want to go see the worst anti-Muslim animus? Go to Hollywood, and still the racist depictions of Muslims in Hollywood is a problem. And we cannot accept these. What do you call them? The handouts. They just give you a handout and they expect you to be happy, like a dog. You give them a treat and the dog is happy. No, we are not going to do that. And with Biden, he's going to rescind the Muslim ban. Well, good, but we should not be satisfied with that, like as if he's a savior. No, he is bringing us back to the way it was before Trump. And Malcolm X said, when you stick a knife in somebody and then you pull it halfway out, we shouldn't applaud you for pulling it only halfway out. And this is the perspective that we should take, that we should not just accept identity politics and handouts and be satisfied with them. That, oh, great, they said uh, wonderful things about Muslims and we should be happy. No, what is the real change we want to see in policy? That to me is the goal. The policies of injustice. How are we going to correct the policies of injustice? And there's no wonder that you have injustice here and you have injustice abroad with the Uyghurs and the Kashmiris and the Rohingya and now the Muslims of India and then the civil wars throughout the Middle East that is creating a refugee crisis in Yemen and Syria, and what's happening to the Palestinians every day. Um, this is these are injustices that we Muslims know too well. So creating the space for us to have a policy discourse. And remember Dr. Maher Hathout, Allah Yarham, who said, first you have to establish a presence, then you gain respect. Then after respect, you get acceptance to have a seat at the table. Then after that, we can talk about how to influence the situation. But we have to go through that step ladder process before we can really expect to have an effect on policy and effect to have a change in the way we look. Secondly, after the policy issues is
Before you get there, where are we as far as that ladder is concerned?
we're still between presence and respect. Either we are ignored or we're disrespected. Like people love our food, but,
Yeah.
but do they respect us? They go, oh, Yasir, come here. And they say, and they come for the iftar and they say the wonderful things. But the question, do these people really respect? Now, some of them do. I'm not, of course, those who come to our communities, I don't want to disrespect them. But if they just look to a proclamation and say, Eid Mubarak, and that's it. The kings of the Middle East do the same thing. They issue the proclamations, and that's it. There needs to be more than just that. There needs to be this tete-a-tete where they look at us and we look at them in equal footing. And when they talk about Islam and Muslims, we need to be there. Well, the one thing we can't stand is turning on the TV and we see 3 or 4 white men talking about Islam and Muslims, and they themselves are not Muslims. So
I'm
we,
sorry, Salam, sorry. So what is it that, in order to have that space in the table, you would be bringing something to the table? What is
yeah,
it that we would be bringing?
that is the question, Yasser, and this is probably the issue that we need to study. But in short, the short answer to that is the United States government is concerned about world peace. So how are Muslims bringing peace to the situations where there is instability and war? The United States is concerned about immigration. We want equity in immigration, but how do we do it in a reasonable way? The United States government once is talking about religious freedom. How are we looking at religious freedom in a way that is just and at the same time respects the rights of everybody in terms of religious freedom? The United States wants to have also a society where there is separation of church and state. Where are we on this issue of separation of church and state? Where are we on the issue of respecting the rights of everybody, including those who don't agree with our way of life? These are the issues that we have to be introspective on. And then I think the recommendations and policies and unification of the Muslim movement towards common goals will be easier.
Got it. So for our viewers out there, if you've just joined us, our guest this evening is Salam Maryati, Executive Director of MPAC, Muslim Public Affairs Council, based in Los Angeles. And we were talking about the events of January 6th. And please, if you have a question for Salam, you can go to the chat, and I am looking into our YouTube. And please do share your questions with us, and I'll share them with Salam. So I stopped you at speaking about the ladder, and you said that was going to be the first step that we ought to be taking right now, and that is our ability to influence policy. Okay, and you said in order to do that, you must have presence. You must be present at the table, and you are saying that with the election of Joe Biden, our opportunity by the numbers of elected Muslim elected officials at this point, somehow that increases our opportunity to do so. Is this what you're alluding to?
Yes. So it's not just the number of Muslim elected officials, it's the number of Muslim staffers and the number of engagements with decision makers, with the Secretary of State and the Attorney General and the Secretary of Homeland Security and the Secretary of Health and Human Services, who, by the way, is he was the congressman of the Islamic Center, Javier Becerra, the incoming Secretary of Health and Human Services, was with us in the Islamic Center and came to us on 9/11. So it's these kinds of strategic relationships that are going to be important, because by educating them, they can then make better decisions when it comes to Islam and Muslims, and they can inform others around them, because these people are going to be in the White House almost on a daily basis. So these kinds of strategic relationships is going to be very, very important.
And Salam, what do you say to people who are not very optimistic of this approach? Meaning that there are certain policies, no matter who is in office, they will never they will never change. As far as just the first initial point that you made, that the U.S. is concerned in its foreign policy about world peace. I am very sure that a lot of people are going to disagree with this notion. I think many people would quote Henry Kissinger when he said, addressing a group of US diplomats, he said that your job is not to resolve the conflict, your job is to manage the conflict. Because as long as there is conflict, somehow it's good for business. So some people would just look into this and they would say, look, all you are going to get is at best somebody pulling the knife, halfway out. So
But
I don't think that.
I think for every Kissinger, there are people who are much better than that. And I hope, again, the incoming Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, is better than that. I think you're going to see some movement on Syria with Blinken. We'll see, but and then number two, it's not just about those in power, but it's about the American public and public opinion. So that's the second. Policy is one thing. Public opinion is a second thing. So public opinion is also something where we need to have a presence and a respect and a seat at the table, and learn how to influence. And I think we're getting better at that. I think we're much better. Like you see Muslims now having their own talk shows. Mehdi Hassan and Wajahat Ali is writing more, and so on and so forth. So you're beginning to see more Muslims into the field of public opinion. In our day, what we were told, you either become a doctor or an engineer. Now you have more options. So even though doctors are very important, especially in COVID-19, but we have more people in the public opinion and public policy arena. We can do things. Before, all we did was issue press releases, and now it's harder, but there's more potential for change. The third thing, so you have policy, you have public opinion. The third is the hardest, and that's culture. There still is an anti-Muslim culture in our society, and you were referring to that because people like Bannon, that loves to just talk about the clash of civilizations, and that is where the mosques and the local communities and the individuals play a key role. It's individual acts of compassion and standing up for what is right that will make a profound change. And that is where, forget about politics, forget about media. This is where every individual is critical in that. I'll give you an example. There was this author of Eat, Pray, and Love. I forgot her name, but she was in Indonesia, in an island, and she would walk around. What's that?
Yeah, I'm remembering. Yeah, go ahead.
She was talking to Oprah Winfrey about this story. So she was she had suffered from a divorce, and she went to Indonesia just to do a retreat. And she would be walking around this island. It was a poor island, and she would see this Muslim woman every day, and they would kind of bow to each other in greeting. And this woman got sick one day, and she was in her bed, and who comes through the door but this Muslim that she saw every day. And this Muslim woman embraced her, took care of her, brought her water, brought her food. And she said, that is grace. This Muslim woman was grace. And she said, this is the face of Islam for me. So never underestimate these small acts of compassion, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, like the mustard seed. No matter, whatever it is, God will bring it to light. And these are the opportunities for the individual. It doesn't take political organizations. It doesn't take media, public relations firms, but it is our individual acts that we base on Islam that will make the difference.
Nice. And I really do like. I think Elizabeth Gilbert is the name of the.
This was Gilbert. Thank you.
Yes, of the author.
You would beat me in Trivial Pursuits.
No, actually, I cheated. I asked Sheikh Google, and Sheikh Google gave me the
Google,
answer.
he
He did.
has everything. Yeah.
It comes in very, very handy. But I did watch that interview, and I
Yes.
can really see how, if that show was watched by about, 30, 40 million people, and somehow this person is relaying their experience, and they said, look, to me, this was the face of Islam on the basis of an act of one poor lady somewhere in some poor Indonesian island. It is that, I mean, it's really, really profound and beautiful. And I think um, this is what I think in US culture they refer to this as very slow, but it is the surest way to get there. And that is, people would want to have a personal experience. And I think um, what do you call research that was done. I don't remember if it was CARE or it was MPAC, found out that the people who held positive views of Islam and Muslims were people who came in contact with
Right.
Muslim people.
Right.
And I love how you
Actually,
phrased
it
it.
was actually Pew, but we
Few.
quoted both MPAC and CARE quoted a Pew study. Yes.
Yeah. And I love how you said that this is where you don't really need a political what do you call a political entity, or this is where the individuals can come in and they can play a role with or without. And all politics are local,
Our
as
local.
they say. Yeah.
Where do you where are you based again?
We are in Memphis. We are in Memphis now. Okay.
Well, I mean, no better place than start from Memphis, Tennessee to do this kind of engagement. And if you do it, we'll be there and we'll support you.
And
Um,
I, and I must really say, I haven't been here for long now, a little less than a year, and I think that the Muslim community, and like you referred, Muslims are really getting there, and you really appreciate mature communities that understand that their local politics are very, very important. Getting to meet, what people in the city council, getting to meet people who are, in the school district, participating there, making sure that you have presence in these places, the soup kitchen. And I can tell you that the local community is really great
that's right. And
about doing these things.
the key is to raise the profile of all this great local work.
Okay.
Um, there's a lot of good work done in the Muslim community locally, but it's not registering nationally. And we have to connect the dots and show how this is really a national voice and help each other amplify our voices.
Yeah. And I think you're aware of the story that came out a few days back. The local doctor, I
Uh,
forgot where he was in Michigan, where
no,
he forgave
Arkansas.
Arkansas. He forgave the debts of his patients,
Mhm.
almost coming to about $600,000, over $500,000, and he said these are difficult times for all people, and he just decided he was not going to go after them, and he just forgave their debts, and that's beautiful, man.
That's
These are
beautiful.
like really, really beautiful things, and people can relate to that.
That's right. That's right.
Mm. Yeah, and as Muslims, see, how do you make, like you said, that bring in the profiling these stories and bringing them to a national level? I mean, to what extent are we doing good work versus what publicity related um, activities? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
When are we performing and where are we informing, I
I mean,
guess?
you need number one. I think we should all agree. We need better PR. I mean, our biggest problem is not that we're overdoing it on PR. Our biggest problem is that we do the work, but we just don't know how to get it out there. We don't know how to get the message out there. I think there's a difference between, you know, not having enough PR and then just doing things for a photo op. I think that's what people are turned off by. Like if we only do things just so that we can get our picture with the senator or with the president, and that's all that that's all that ever happens. That is problematic, of course. And if people give $10,000 to a politician and all they get is a photo op from it, that's just a waste of money. I would say that works against us. Never really helps us. But to connect these efforts with movements for social justice, I think that's the key.
Got it. Beautiful. And Salam, this is really beautiful, and we're almost out of time here. And if I may, suggest this idea of the local engagement.
Yeah.
In addition to that, what about, okay, where do we go for as far as 224 is concerned or 2024 is concerned? What about accountability for this administration? And also, I know when we had Ibiari here on one time, he said that we also need to engage with those who seemingly are against us,
Yeah.
because in 2024 they may be the next administration.
They might, inshallah, they won't be, but they might be. And it's 2022. It's the midterm election also. They might take over the Congress. So we have to be ready for that. I think people are already planning for dealing with 2022. Um, by the way, the guy I think who ran against Lindsey Graham in South Carolina has been appointed to be the head of the Democratic National Committee, Jamie Harrison.
Mm.
So working with people like that, I think, is going to be key. I think that when it comes to preparing ourselves for that situation, and again, this requires more than just a conversation. Although I love talking to you, it requires serious collective thinking with the plan. But one group that we worked with that might be of importance for all of us now is called a group called Life After Hate.
Mm.
And these are former white supremacists who are going back to the communities to try to rehabilitate those people that have that hatred in their heart.
Mm.
And partnering with them, supporting them, getting the government to support them more would be in our strategic interests. And then engaging people who are former white supremacists just to understand. I mean, I think that's the one thing that it still boggles our mind. We have no idea, we cannot fathom how a person can turn out like that. And there's a book that I'm sure you read. It's called True American by this Bangladeshi man, Rais Bhuiyan, who came to America. And on 9/11, he was shot in the face by a white supremacist. And he went on Hajj later on and then decided that he wanted to forgive this man because this man was a victim of hate. It's a beautiful story. And the author is a New York Times writer, and Anand Giridharadas. And Anand talks about how Rais is the true American. And this guy was a victim of hate, but he also talks about how he lived in a drug infested, impoverished life. I don't think we appreciate what people go through, aside from white supremacists, but just what kind of poverty there is around us we're not aware of. Yes, we have the food banks, and that's great, but I'm talking about changing the conditions of our society so that people don't have to live under those conditions anymore. Those are the things we need to be working on.
I remember in one of your fundraising dinners, you had invited the author. Uh,
Yeah,
I remember I was there, and he did tell it was a fascinating story,
yeah,
really fascinating, beautiful story, and like you said, people like Rais and their stories are not highlighted in such a way that would change the perception of the people um of the
yeah.
people here.
Can I tell
Yeah,
you one more story? Do you have time
please
for one
do,
more?
please
So
do.
there's a woman by the name of Diane. She was a Fulbright scholar back in the 70s, and she worked in Muslim countries. And she fell in love with the Muslims there, and they fell in love with her. And she had a dog, and you know how in our culture we tend to, although I have my dog right here, who's bothering me, but um, so when her dog was sick, they would ask about her dog. When her dog died, they would bring food. I mean, they would bring sweets to her home because that's what you do when a member of the family dies. So she was touched by that, and so she comes back to the United States, and then Trump has the Muslim ban, and she's outraged. She calls MPAC. Somebody from Harvard says, talk to MPAC. They know how to deal with this issue. So she called us and says, I'm very outraged. I know Muslims to be very loving people. I want to do something. I said, okay, where are you? She says, I'm in Athens, Georgia. Athens is about 2 hours from Atlanta.
Right.
So I go and I take a flight to Atlanta, drive through the woods of Georgia, which is kind of scary. But I went ahead and did it. And then I said, you know what, Diane, why don't we go to a church and tell your story? So we went to an evangelical church, and she told her story. And we had Imam Clement El-Amin join us. He's from Atlanta. And we all so he talked about the Quran. She told her story. I talked about anti-Muslim tropes. A man came to us afterwards, and he says, you know what? I use these anti-Muslim tropes to get Republican officials elected in Georgia. Now I realize how wrong I am, and I'm touched by Diane's story. I ask for your forgiveness.
Oh.
And we accepted his forgiveness, and we embraced, before COVID-19, of course. And so that is the kind of change that I'm looking for. I'm not looking for, the change at the top all the time. Get the president to change and get the Secretary of State to change. Yeah, we'll keep working on it, but it's the change at the local level that's so important. Diane died. She had terminal cancer. When she died, we got a call, said, oh, Diane left you a bequest to do this work. So we have now a bequest from a non-Muslim who cared about Muslims to do the work of changing hearts and minds in America. And that's why if you do something in Memphis, I think Diane would be happy to use part of the bequest to do this kind of work and create this kind of change.
Salam, that's a really beautiful story. That is really, really a nice story.
Alhamdulillah.
And it's not, I mean, we're not just talking about the ending, but we're just talking about the potential change that it is bringing. We're talking about somebody who's saying, look, I use these same tropes to elect Republicans in my area, and now please forgive me for doing that. But that's very telling, man.
Right.
And sometimes I don't think that we appreciate and we highlight the power of the individual, like you said earlier. So for all of our viewers who are out there watching this, please remember that this is not something that, these are all things that each and every one of us is capable of doing in whatever capacity it is that we are in. Salam, this has been a really, really beautiful conversation with you. And I love your steps about, what the suggestions are, especially the last one. Local engagement is really, really important. Thank you for bringing up the
And
group.
just to emphasize, the local engagement is our path towards cultural change. That's what's going to change the culture.
Yeah. And also thank you for highlighting the Life After Hate movement. I've been listening to them. I've been listening to the type of work that they do, the way that these people are trying to, I guess, repent or atone for their past sins, and it's very telling. And like you said, sometimes you don't appreciate what poverty does to people, and by no means I am making excuses.
Right.
Just offering an explanation of why potentially people fall into these things. And I remember that one of them actually became a professor and went back to studying race, and he was looking into cult movements and how they I guess, for a lack of a better word, brainwash and recruit people. And it was really, really fascinating to be looking at. So we will look out for them here in Memphis, and who knows, maybe we will have you come down here in Memphis, inshallah.
I'll be there with mask and all. I'll put my mask on and I'll be there, inshallah.
And inshallah, hopefully very soon we will be able to resume our lives normally. But until then, people, make sure that you all stay safe, especially if you are in the Los Angeles area. Like Salam, I
Yeah.
hear that it's not going very well.
One in three is infected right now.
That is That's really high. May Allah keep you
Mind-boggling.
safe and all the people in Los Angeles safe, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Salam, on behalf of all of our viewers, we want to thank you for coming on our show again. Jazakallah khair. And we will always be calling on you, inshallah. And to all of our viewers, thank you for joining us this evening. And we will see you next time, inshallah, the same place, the same time. Until then, we say so long and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you.
Thank you. Salam.